people that make a lot of mistakes when they install tile. A lot of people take things for granted that you don't need this or you don't need that. But I want to just talk about many of the common mistakes that people make when they're installing a tile floor. I'm going to concentrate on a plywood substrate or an OSB substrate. Okay, so the first mistake is not knowing whether you can support a tile floor or not. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is make sure that your floor can support a porcelain or a natural stone tile. So what this means is you need to find out what the deflection is. This is not something that you can skip. So you need to know if your substructure, if your plywood subfloor is strong enough to support tile. Don't just assume that it does. So what is deflection? Deflection is the amount the floor will bend or deform under live and dead loads. The numbers are important. For a ceramic or porcelain tile, the deflection has to be L over 360. For stone, it's L over 720. So what that means, if you're putting a natural stone down, the floor has to be twice as stiff as that a ceramic tile. If your floor meets the L over 360 standard for a porcelain or a ceramic tile, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to meet the L over 720. So if you want marble, or if you want a natural stone, travertine or something like that, and you got the 360 but you don't have the 720, you can get a tile that looks like marble. And today, I mean, porcelain tiles are very convincing. You can find a porcelain tile that looks just like a natural stone. So that's an option. If you can't do that, then you're going to have to strengthen your subfloor. Either you're going to have to add another layer of plywood, or you're going to have to sister up some joists, or you're going to have to do something to make the floor stiff enough to meet the L over 720 deflection standard. You can't skip that. And the reason for that is that natural stone is a lot less forgiving, has veins, highline cracks, it's not completely solid. A lot of times you see like a travertine, you see turn over the back of the tile and there's a lot of voids in it. And on the front of the tile, it's filled with a filler. So a lot of natural stones are not very strong, so you need to have a floor that's stiff enough to support that. But if it isn't even a strong enough ceramic, then you have to do the same thing. You have to beef up your floor. Like I said, either add another layer of plywood, you're going to have to modify the joist structure, sister up some joists, add a lolly column, something. You're going to need to do something. So another mistake is people don't check for flatness. So once you know your floor meets the deflection standard, you have to check how flat the floor is. So once you got your floor stable and suitable and strong enough for a ceramic tile or a marble tile, so you think now you're ready to install your tile, or install your underlayment and install your tile. Not quite. First you have to make sure that the floor is flat enough for your tile. So I didn't say level, I said flat, because the floor doesn't necessarily have to be level, it just has to be flat. There's a saying in the industry that says level is desired, but flat is required. The floor doesn't have to be level, it just needs to be flat. This is from the TCNA handbook, so let me just read this. For tiles with all edges less than 15 inches, the maximum allowable variation is a 1/4 inch in 10 feet and no more than 1/16 of an inch in 12 inches. For large format tiles with one edge greater than 15 inches and for natural stone tiles, the maximum allowable substrate variation can be no more than 1/8 of an inch in 10 feet and 1/16 of an inch in 24 inches. So for large format tiles, it has to be twice as flat. And a large format tile is anything with one side larger than 15 inches. That could be 6 inch by 24 inch tile. It could be 6 inch by 36 inch tile. And don't think that a leveling system is the solution to a non-flat or a wavy floor. A leveling system is a tool. It's not a miracle cure for bad floors or bad prep. So don't make the mistake of not prepping your floor and getting it flat. A flat floor is going to be a lot easier. Install your tile, it's going to go a lot quicker, and it's going to be a much better floor. So don't make the mistake of just going over your substrate without fixing it first. You got to make sure your floor is strong enough. You got to make sure it's flat. So another problem I see is people install their backer board. If they're going to use a backer board, they install it directly to the subfloor without putting down a leveling bed of thinset or taping the seams. Or even worse, they put it down with liquid nail type adhesive, just a bead of liquid nails and then putting it down, and they think that's good. I'm not going to go into the details why it's wrong, etc., etc. There's plenty of proof, plenty of evidence, plenty of videos that show how floors have failed. So don't make the mistake of installing your backer board without a leveling bed of thinset. Strong enough, flat enough, install the underlayment the proper way. Don't skip steps and don't take shortcuts. The manufacturers have designed, tested, and developed the products. They know how it works and why it has to be done a certain way. So for in the case of a backer board, they've tested it with thinset under it, without thinset under it, with the seams taped, without the seams taped. They know how it works and why it has to be installed in a certain way. So if you want the performance you're supposed to get with the product that you're using, install it according to the directions given by the manufacturer. The TCNA handbook is also a great resource. The TCNA handbook is like the Bible for the tile setter. It has all the methods and standards that you need to follow to install a tile project successfully. But manufacturer's recommendations supersede the TCNA. If the manufacturer says to do something a certain way, that's how you're supposed to do it. If you just skip some steps and just do it how you've seen on YouTube videos where people are just installing the backer board, no thinset, no taping the seams, and then you have a problem with cracked and loose tiles, don't be surprised, because that's not how the manufacturers say you need to install it. For example, the leveling bed is so that the backer board is fully supported. There are no voids under it, so there's no movement. It's sitting completely supported. And then the taping the seams, the reason for that is so you make it one monolithic plane. If you don't tape the seams, now you have individual panels that are moving independently of each other. If you tape the seams, now you have a monolithic plane and it all moves together. So that's why you need to tape the seams. So the way I see it is, if you do one thing wrong, you make a mistake, one mistake, or you don't follow one step, your floor probably gonna be all right, maybe. But if you do two things wrong, now you've compounded that mistake and multiplied your chances it's going to fail. So if you keep on skipping steps or making mistakes or not doing it the way it's supposed to be done, you're just going to increase the chances that the floor is going to fail. So what to do is do everything the way it's supposed to be done so you get the best chance of having a floor that doesn't fail. Doing everything right ensures long-lasting, trouble-free installation. So just do it the proper way. Don't make the mistake of skipping steps, using inferior products, or just leaving something out. Same goes for other types of underlayments, like an uncoupling membrane or mud floor or whatever it may be. There's all kinds of different underlayments. Install those according to the manufacturer's directions, using the correct materials to install that product. So now you got a strong floor, you got a flat floor, you got your underlayment installed properly according to directions. What next? Well, you should already have your tile, because or at least you should know what kind of tile you're going to install, because the flatness of the floor is dependent on the tile you're going to use. So if you don't know whether it's going to be a large format or a smaller tile, just prep it for a large format tile, because the prep for a large format tile is good for a smaller tile as well. Please don't buy the cheapest tile you can find. I know tile can be expensive, but cheap tile is cheap for a reason. They're not cheap because they're made as good as expensive tile. They're cheap because they are cheap. Tiles are manufactured to certain standards. So when you look at a tile, it's got a bunch of numbers on there. It's got the die lot, it's got the caliber, it's got the gauge, it's got the size and the model. The die lot, the caliber, and the gauge are very important. The die lot means that all the tiles of that model or that series of tile are all going to be the same die lot. They're all going to be the same color, or they're going to have the same variations, or whatever it is. They're all going to be the same. The caliber is the size of the tile. So the size of the tile will be all within the tolerances of that caliber. And the gauge is the thickness of the tile. So all the tiles are going to be within the tolerances of that gauge, that series of tiles. So when the tiles are made, they're larger, then they fire them and they shrink, and then they get sorted. They get sorted by caliber, gauge, so that when you buy a box of tiles, they're all going to be the same caliber, same gauge. So when you buy 50 boxes, you're going to make sure that all the numbers match, because if you get all the tiles of all the same die lot but different calibers, well, they're all going to be the same color or the right color, but some tiles might be bigger or smaller than others. Same for the gauge. Gauge is not as big an issue as caliber. So you just got to make sure all the boxes have the same numbers. When you go to a tile store, usually it's a much safer option. If you go to a box store, for example, and you need 30 boxes, so you go to the shelf and you get 30 boxes of tile off the shelf. Oh, yeah, you're all set, right? Not necessarily, because a lot of times someone came before you came, they needed 30 boxes and there were 50 boxes in the store. Now they come and take the 30 boxes, there's 20 boxes left over, so now they restock the shelves. They restock the shelves with another dialot or with another caliber. Or maybe the store doesn't have as many tiles as you need. You need 50 boxes and I've only got 40. So they say, well, we've got another 10 boxes at this other store. So you go get them there and they're completely different dialots. So that's an important thing. You can get those tiles at those stores, but just make sure that all the numbers match, so that when you go to install your tile, you put in a 6" by 36" tile, and then you get another dialot or another caliber, and instead of being 6 inches, it's 6 1/4 or 6 1/8 or 5 5/8 or whatever. So just make sure that all the numbers match. Very important. This happens time and time and time again. So don't expect a tile that you buy at pennies a square foot to be the same as a tile that you buy at dollars a square foot. They're not the same. There's a reason why they're not the same. You know, we just talked about caliber and dialog and all that stuff. So there's a reason. So if you're going to make a cheaper tile, you have to save money somewhere. So where are you going to save the money? If you need a cheap tile, buy a tile that's being cut in price because the store's trying to get rid of it. A tile that was more money, and now they slashed the price because they've only got so much left, or they don't make it anymore, or whatever the reason. So they want to get rid of it. That's when you can buy it. Not a cheap tile, but an inexpensive tile. A tile that is a good quality tile being discontinued, or the store doesn't want to carry it anymore. That's when you can buy a less expensive tile. This is just my opinion. All tiles are not equal. So now you got a flat floor, you got a strong floor, a flat floor, put down your underlayment, you got your tile, now you got to install the tile. And you need a glue to install your tile. So if you're looking at something that's in a bucket, put the bucket down, turn around, walk away, don't look back. If it's in a bucket, you don't want it. Take my word for it, you don't want it. Although there are other adhesives, thinset is what you're going to use in the vast majority of cases. There are different kinds of thinsets that meet different standards. So you need to get the thinset that's appropriate for your tile, for your underlayment, and for your substrate. Don't use thinset that you find in a bucket. Use a good quality thinset of the right type. You need to get the correct thinset for the tile and substrate you're using. So if you're in a box store and you're going up and down the aisles and you don't know what thinset to use, don't ask a salesperson. Every bag of thinset has the standard printed on it. So you can find the thinset you need by looking at the standard. And obviously a cheaper thinset isn't going to be as good as a more expensive thinset. If you buy a thinset that has the A118.4 on it, it's going to meet that standard. But if you buy the cheapest thinset, it'll just barely meet that standard. If you get a more expensive thinset, it's going to exceed that standard. So just buy good quality thinset, because the thinset is the thing that's going to hold everything together. And the thinset is not what's going to make or break the bank. Depending on the floor you're doing, you're going to need 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bags, whatever. If you've got a really big floor, you might need more. But the thinset is not the thing you want to skimp on. The thinset is the thing that you want to spend the most money you can. A strong floor, a flat floor, underlayment installed correctly, you know what your tile is, and you know what thinset you're going to use. Now, you go out and you got your expensive thinset and you go buy a V-notch trowel to install your 6" by 36" tile, because with the smaller trowel, you're not going to use a lot of thinset, you're going to save a little bit of money. Please don't do that. The bigger the tile, the bigger the trowel. So if you've got a mosaic tile, that V-notch trowel is probably going to be okay. Not always, but probably going to be okay. If you've got a 12 by 12 tile, that V-notch trowel is just not going to work. And if you've got a 6" by 36" plank tile, it's just a disaster waiting to happen. So, the bigger the tile, the bigger the trowel. The reason you got to get the right size trowel is because you have to get the correct coverage on the tile. For interior, coverage has to be 80%. So 80% of the tile has to be covered in thinset. If you're in a wet area, or you're exposed, or if it's natural stone, that bumps up to 95%. And in all cases, the edges and the corners have to be supported. The goal is always complete coverage, but 80% required inside or non-wet areas, 95% for wet areas, outside or natural stone. Corners and edges fully supported. Back buttering can always be helpful, but it doesn't ensure the coverage you need. So make sure you get the correct coverage, because you don't want to use V-notch trowel. You're getting like barely 30% coverage and you think your floor is done. No, you need to get the correct coverage. And the flatness of the floor is going to help with that immensely. So you got, say, a 1/2 inch trowel. Now you're going to start slapping your thinset on the floor. You got all kinds of swirls. You're going to go in all different directions. Wrong. You're gonna spread your thinset. You're gonna get it all even, and then the thinset, the trowel is a gauge, and what that does, it leaves behind the correct amount of thinset. So what you want to do is you spread your thinset, and then your final comb, you're gonna comb everything in the same direction. Preferably, if you've got a plank towel, the short way of the towel. Sometimes it's not always possible because you're constrained by whatever reason, but keep it at the very least always go in the same direction. And the reason for that is so that you can compress the lines, evacuate the air, and get good coverage. Strong floor, flat floor, a tile, thinset, you spread your thinset, we've got all those bases covered. Now, you don't like grout lines, so what you're going to do is you're going to butter your tiles as close as possible, so without a grout line. So if you're going to do that, you might as well get a little hammer and chip all the tiles of your edges beforehand, so it'll look like you meant to do it. Never, never, never butt your tiles tight together. Minimum grout line is a 1/16 of an inch. Never less than a 1/16. Not a 32nd, not a 64. The minimum is 1/16. So don't even consider going any smaller than that. And it's probably going to be bigger. And the reason for that has to do with the deflection that we talked about in the beginning of the video. The deflection, you got a nice strong floor, but it's still going to bend a little bit. So you got the tiles stuck together, and then you step on it, and the floor is going to deflect a little bit, bend a little bit, and the edges of the tile are going to chip and spall and crack and whatever. No less than a 1/16 of an inch. The size of the grout line actually depends on how even the tiles run. If you've got those cheap tiles that you bought at the box store for 80 cents a square foot, and you want to put a 1/16 of a inch grout line, probably not going to happen. There's actually a rule how to determine the width of the grout line. What I'm going to suggest that you lay some tile on the floor, on your flat floor, figure out what works, and go with that. But remember, it's probably going to be an 1/8 or more. 1/16 of an inch usually only works for rectified tiles. Always, always, always do the research. Get the proper tools, get the proper adhesives, get as much information as you can before you install your tile. And even if you're going to hire someone, if you know something a little bit, you know the process, probably you're going to be able to spot a mistake if they make it. There's a lot of hacks out there, and the more you know, the better off you are. The last mistake I'm going to mention is movement joints. So you got a nice baseboard, your baseboard's on, you're going to put your tile tight to the baseboard, and then you're going to grout on it. You're not going to do that. Never, never cut your tile tight to a wall or the baseboard or up against an island or whatever. Anything that doesn't move, you have to leave a gap. If you're going up to a hardwood floor, you're going to leave a gap, because the hardwood floor moves a lot more than your tile floor. The actual standard perimeter movement joint in doorways, inside or not exposed, you're going to do every 20 to 25 feet. You're going to put a movement joint in both directions. So if you've got a floor that's 50 feet long and 10 feet wide, you're going to put it all around the perimeter, and then every 25 feet, so that'd be in the middle of the floor, you're going to put a movement joint. If the area is exposed or if it's outside, it's going to be every 8 to 12 feet in every direction. If it's exposed to the sun, it's going to heat up a lot more, freeze, thaw, whatever. So outside, 8 to 12, inside 20 to 25. And the perimeter. Don't skip the movement joint.